So when you were in the Secretary of Defense office, you mentioned you were there for 73 days and a lot happened, including the storming of the Capitol. Is there anything you wish you had done differently, or how do you evaluate it now looking back?
I'm hypercritical of my performance. That's the nature of being a former special operator. That's the one thing you get done with. You never did good enough. I'm telling you, it was amazing growing up. You'd be like, we did everything right. The operation went perfectly. And when you did the after action review where you did your hot wash after, the person that led it, they would always find fault, and I love that. And they're like, you know what? You could have turned left 2 seconds earlier. And you're like, yeah. So I love that. And I embrace that. And so I absolutely did a hot wash and all that. And the story has not been told. And, that's where I realized I thought national security was above partisanship. That's the criticism I have of myself, was I was so freaking naive. I was like, well, now, at the end of the day, we're all Americans and we care about national security and we're not going to politicize this. My experience from that was, oh my gosh. And that's what we're experiencing right now. The truth has not been told. The full story has not been told. When
you say that, do you mean the whole story has not been told in terms of how politicized every action is?
No, what has not been told yet is in the complete narrative of what happened that day. And the Department of Defense and I have been, harshly criticized, and Ryan McCarthy, the Secretary of the Army, have been. And my wife and others are like, wow, what would you have done differently? I'm like, you guys don't know the story yet. When the story comes out, I will stand by every decision I made, and it was a correct, proper use of the armed forces. So that's not one. I'll tell you what, I know when I screw up because I lose sleep over it. And then you have like some moral guilt. We all have that, right? We all have that, like, oh yeah, kind of like I messed that one up. But maybe sometimes you're in a situation where you have to, posture and say, oh, we did it all right. I have not lost a single moment's sleep about the decision making and what the Department of Defense did that way. And but it hasn't been told yet. And frankly, until Congress pulls their out of there, pulls their head out of there, and has a honest, and I'm not being political right now.
Yeah.
We're not going to know. And that's what I'm seeing right now is like, I watched the testimony and I'm like, they're like, oh God, they're pushing me under the bus. That's fine. But we'll get our say. And I think when it's all said, the problem now with this, entertainment media political complex that is just driving this hyper partisanship even further apart and just driving wedges into our country. I'm sorry to get so emotional, but I live that, when they're attacking your children. Come on, give it a break. For heaven's sakes, we're still Americans. We should still have some respect for each other. And so I'm like, when this story's told, the problem is the narrative's been established. So now you're like page 26, retraction. Miller and McCarthy and the Army and the Department of Defense were not complete morons that day. Actually, when we looked at it, everything they said was accurate. So it'll come out one day. But that was probably the biggest failure on my part, was this idea that I was dealing with rational people that had the best interests of the country at hand. And that definitively is not the case.